Hey, what's up, Closer fam? It's me, Plus Ultraman, and welcome to a brand new What If on the channel. Let's not waste any time and jump right in. By the way, this What If was suggested by user Ronnie on Top on one of my community posts, so make sure you're paying attention to the immunity tab so you don't miss important news and updates. Now, to make this premise work, I want to make one major change to the timeline, and that major change is Paragus and Bardock are old friends. When Bardock was a bit younger, he had served in the same planet raid squad as Paragus, and because of this, he actually impressed the older Saiyan, causing him to take him under his wing. Because of this, Bardock was influenced to also hold an amount of disrespect for King Vegeta, but he served faithfully as Paragus did. And he is also taught the ins and outs of Saiyan politics and military life, who to speak to, who to be friends with, things that give him a leg up on the competition. Fast forward a couple of years, and Bardock is promoted and now leads his own raid team, now being considered a Saiyan elite himself. But in age 732, King Vegeta has his first child, along with Paragus having his son Broly, and even Bardock having his first child, Raditz, who in this timeline would be born much stronger. A while later, we would still get the introduction of Frieza as the new Emperor of the Universe, as King Cold steps down from the position, and King Vegeta still has the discovery of Broly, where he still reacts in the exact same way, with fear, for his sovereignty and for the safety of the Saiyans. Once Paragus hears of Broly's exile, he races out to find Bardock, wanting to at the very least have the backup of a Saiyan he trusted. He explains the situation to his friend, but Bardock sadly declines. He explains that he just wasn't willing to leave Gine behind like that. Not to mention his son Raditz was still here on planet Vegeta, and he couldn't just abandon him as well. And as a father who feels a sense of loyalty towards his own son, Paragus at least understands that part of the situation. But Bardock, knowing how dangerous Vampa was, tells Gine to load Paragus up with as much food and water as she could, so he'd have some rations. Hopefully, Paragus could communicate with Bardock somehow, and they could all plan a rescue mission when the time is right. Paragus thanks his friend for what he was able to do, and sets off. He goes through the exact same thing he does in canon, and steals a scout ship. Though in this timeline, you could argue that Beats wouldn't follow Paragus into the ship, because it took extra time to stop and speak to Bardock. But I'm actually going to leave that to still happen. So the two make their way to Vampa, and everything there goes virtually the same. The only change I'm going to make is that Paragus will not kill Beats. He does this for two reasons. Number one, if Bardock ever did come to help, having an engineer on the planet who could repair any damage to the ship he arrived in would be invaluable. Number two, because of how much he has come to trust Bardock in this timeline, Paragus is a lot more merciful and decides against killing him. There's also the factor of all the food that Gine had sent him with, as well as Broly showing that you could eat the bugs on the planet. But for now, the trio of Saiyans is stranded on Vampa. Over the next 5 years, we see Paragus has taken to making Broly train in preparation for his revenge, even deciding to help Beats toughen up some so that he could kill his own Vampa beetles and secure his own food. The trio learn the ways of the world and become adept at surviving there, learning what times of day it was best to train or sleep or eat, getting used to scarfing down the beats for food, and growing stronger in general. But finally, one day, the same day that Broly had lost his first friend Ba to be exact, the boy is off by himself, angry at his father of what he had done, and petting the severed ear around his waist. A while later though, Beats is actually able to find Broly, as the two had developed a sort of big brother and little brother relationship over the last 5 years. The lanky older Saiyan tries to comfort his younger friend, explaining that his father just wanted Broly to focus on his training and get strong. He even offered to try and help mend the relationship between Broly and his pet. But then, interrupting their conversation, they see two Saiyan pods entering the atmosphere and rush back to get Paragus. This is what they've been waiting for the last 5 years. The trio later returns to the crash site and open up the first pod, finding it to be full of supplies. Paragus and the others were confused by this, but assumed that Bardock was in the other pod. When they open it up though, they do not see Bardock, but his mini-me. With the young Saiyan boy was a hologram message, and on it was Bardock. In the message, he began to explain everything that had been happening on planet Vegeta since Paragus had left, from the gathering of the Saiyans by Frieza and his suspicions of this gathering, all the way to telling him that his other son Raditz was currently working with Prince Vegeta. Bardock ends his message by saying that he's betting everything on Paragus, even Kakarot's life. If he didn't arrive within a year, then he should assume that Bardock was right and try to escape Vampa on his own. Paragus plays the message back a few times, running the entire situation through his mind. But he finally sighs and told Beats to help him get the pods back to their cave, and grabs Kakarot by his tail, rendering him unconscious before telling Broly to carry him. The group returns home, happy to have food other than Vampa beetles, but are dissatisfied with their new obligation to remain on the planet longer. Back on planet Vegeta, the plan to eradicate the Saiyans still takes place, but I want to make one small change here. Because Bardock is a Saiyan elite, I'm going to say that he has access not only to the Powerball technique, but also full control in his Luzaro form. See, in the Broly movie, we see that Bardock has some battle damage before Frieza destroys planet Vegeta, so it's implied that he had been fighting someone beforehand. So in this timeline, we see a Great Ape Bardock running through Frieza's soldiers in the atmosphere above planet Vegeta, before Frieza destroys him and the planet in one blast. And trust me, the Tyrant remembers this. Back on Vampa, we see that Paragus continues Broly's training, making the boy grow in strength at a much faster pace than what he should for a child his age. Seeing this, Kakarot also wants to get stronger and do some training of his own. It's just natural instinct for him to want to do so. That said, I don't think Paragus would have much interest in training Kakarot. The only use he could have is another sparring partner for Broly, but he was still too weak to be much worth in that sense. So instead, he has Beats train the kid. That way they could both keep busy and Beats could grow stronger as well as Kakarot. Their days go along just like this, with very little deviation from that schedule, and notably, Kakarot does get stronger over time. His voracious appetite forces him to take on the bugs on Vampa, and sometimes he bits off a bit more than he can chew, so he'd have to get saved and probably get a Zenkai boost with that. Not to mention, being Kakarot, he would probably want to challenge Broly in some type of way, which again would make him grow stronger despite training with a very strong opponent. But finally, their year passes, and with no sign of Bardock, they realize he just wasn't coming. With a small group of Saiyans only able to assume that Planet Vegeta had indeed been destroyed by Frieza, Beats grows incredibly sad and depressed hearing of the destruction of his home. While Broly and Kakarot, on the other hand, really have no memory of their planet, so there isn't much context on what they should be sad about, while Paragus is slowly but surely being consumed by his thirst for vengeance. He just grows angry and bitter as he's under the impression that King Vegeta and his offspring have all died. With his last ambition in life snuffed out, Paragus orders Beast to help him start stripping the 3 Saiyan pods on their planet for parts, and hopefully they can repair the main floater on the ship they arrived in. Meanwhile, he would slow down on Broly's training. If there is no Vegeta or King Vegeta, there is no reason to push the boy so hard. With Paragus showing this leeway, Broly actually gets to be a kid for the first time in his life, and we would also see he and Kakarot truly befriend each other. The 2 young Saiyans would train and play together, and Broly could even try to introduce Kakarot to Ba, who probably wouldn't fully accept Saiyans ever again, but can learn to tolerate them. Paragus, though disapproving of this behavior, decides to focus on leaving Vampa instead of telling Broly what to do. Now the rebuilding of their ship is going to take a little while, so let's move back to what's happening with the Frieza forces. Remember Bardock's fight with them? Well, that news forces Frieza to take harsher actions against the remaining Saiyan underlings he has. That said, Frieza is no fool. He's a savvy businessman, so he decides to put them into much more dangerous missions than in canon, the next ones always being more dangerous than the last. This way, the Saiyans could serve their purpose of conquering planets, but also possibly get killed on one of these dangerous missions. Because of this, the 2 unnamed Saiyans that are in Vegeta's crew die on one of these harsh missions, and we are left with our 3 main Saiyans, Vegeta, Raditz, and Nappa. Remember, having a stronger Raditz with controlled Ozaru form would be helpful in keeping them all alive, but they're all hurt very badly in their latest mission. But they are taken back to a Frieza planet and put in healing tanks, and gain a Zenkai boost from being so near death. But as soon as they are fully healed, the 3 are approached with another mission. When they see the average power level of its inhabitants are nearly twice that of the last planet, they decide that Frieza must have it out for them. Granted, Frieza was aware of the Saiyan ability to come back stronger after near-death experiences, but this was a mission suitable for the Ginyu Force and not them. It was slowly becoming clearer and clearer that Frieza was deliberately trying to get them killed in one of these missions. Prince Vegeta, at the tender age of 9, is already in control of this group. Trying to think of a way for them to not die in this next mission, he questions Raditz, asking about something he said a while ago, about having a brother that might have survived. If this were true, and there was a possibility that he was alive, then Raditz would need to go get him and bring him here for this next mission. The other Saiyan wholeheartedly agrees, and sets off towards the repugnant planet Vampa. Now let's get to when Raditz actually arrives on the planet, because I don't think his journey will be any longer than 2 or 3 months. He searches the planet with his scouter and pinpoints a cluster of notably strong power levels, and flies there, finding 4 Saiyans instead of 1. One of which recognizes him as the other son of Bardock, Paragus. Recognizing Raditz tells Paragus to tell the story of his past to Bardock, which makes Raditz a lot more trusting of him from the start. And afterwards, the young Saiyan explains the situation with Frieza, assigning harder and harder missions for the remaining Saiyans. This causes Paragus to comment on the fact that Bardock was suspicious that Frieza might betray the Saiyans, and this was further evidence of that fact. When Raditz finally mentions that Prince Vegeta was currently the leader of their 3-man team, the fire of revenge is reignited in Paragus. Now, I had considered having Paragus have a change of heart in this timeline, but I honestly couldn't think of any real influence that would make him do so. Bardock himself was influenced by Paragus to dislike the royal family. Beast, to our knowledge, feels no amazing loyalty towards the royal blood, and Kakarot is way too young, and hasn't been through the events which allow him to change people's hearts as he does in canon. And Broly is just a loyal soldier, so I don't see him contradicting his father. So, with the new goal in mind, Paragus and Beats take the floater from all 4 Saiyan pods on the planet, and are able to finally construct a new main floater for their main ship. This allows the entire group to escape Vampa finally. And again, we'll skip back to when they actually meet the other Saiyans. Once meeting back up with Vegeta and Nappa, they're surprised to see how many Saiyans Raditz had brought back, 4 times what they expected. But this could only be helpful. The group are all briefed on the mission, and remember, this would actually be the first combat mission for Beats, Kakarot, and Broly. But again, with this being a planet suitable for the Ginyu Force to take over, the Saiyans actually have to resort to the Oozaru form right off the bat here. That said, Broly's tail was removed in canon, yes, but it seems that when Saiyans are younger, they can regrow their tails multiple times, so I'll be giving Broly back his tail for this moment. Paragus is wary to let Broly use his Oozaru form in this fight, but pulls him aside and tells him to stay close to Prince Vegeta. Hopefully in his rampage he would accidentally harm him. But Broly just obeys his father. The Saiyans look up at the moon and the raid begins, with Beats, Kakarot, and Broly being completely out of control in their Oozaru forms, with the former of the two having a bit of trouble with the stronger inhabitants of the planet. Vegeta, Paragus, and Nappa, as well as Raditz, being the control combatants, are able to strategically attack the places of great importance to the planet. And around Vegeta would be Broly, doing way more damage than what he actually needed to do. Vegeta, seeing the destruction and realizing they wouldn't be able to get a good price for the planet if he kept this up, tries to put a stop to it, but this causes the two massive beasts to get into a battle. The two great apes begin to fight and wrestle ferociously, devastating the forces surrounding them. Vegeta had the edge in power at first, but Broly was slowly growing angrier and stronger. A hazy green energy began to flow around him, and slowly but surely he began to overtake Vegeta in terms of power. He's finally able to get the upper hand and wail on Vegeta, beating him down into the ground and creating a large crater around them through all the dirt and debris they kicked up. Vegeta, though barely conscious, was amazed at the power that Broly held, and maintained enough sense to reach out with all his might and tear his tail away, before they both passed out. They both begin to return to their human forms and are lost inside the rubble and destruction they had caused as they shrank back down. Hours later, the invasion is deemed a success, as Broly and Vegeta's skirmish seem to have destroyed the majority of the opposing forces. Afterwards, the Saiyans rest up and try to search for the missing Vegeta and Broly, but are unable to locate them. With the search deemed a failure, Kakarot grows very sad to think that his first friend had lost his life in the battle, and even feels guilty as he was the weaker of the two, yet had been the one to survive. He took some solace in the fact that Beats also mirrored his emotions, but it actually angers him that Paragus doesn't seem to be too torn up about losing his own son. As for the others, Raditz, like Nappa, had grown to really respect Vegeta as a comrade. Because he isn't a weakling in this timeline, he wasn't treated too poorly. In fact, he was treated very well, so it's actually a very sad loss for him. That said, you could not call Vegeta his friend, so it's not a debilitating loss. Nappa is hit a bit more heavily by the loss, as Vegeta was his responsibility, but I think now he would take the role of the mentor of the entire group. The big brute of a Saiyan shows some tenderness as he notices Kakarot's sadness. He calls the child to him and teaches him of an old Saiyan custom. He tears a white cloth away from the clothing of one of the defeated enemies and soaks it in the blood coming from one of Kakarot's larger wounds, before tying it around his head and telling him that his comrades would tell him his tears are unbecoming of a Saiyan and to keep moving forward. With that, the tired and injured group return to their ship and leave the planet, reporting the mission as a success. After the mission, Frieza is pleasantly surprised. The Saiyans had successfully conquered a planet that was slated for the Ginyu Force. While that spoke highly of their usefulness, it still bothered him somewhat. Regardless, it'd be foolish to throw them away now, so he'd allow them to serve under him for a while longer, as their own elite force led by Nappa, the Nappa Force. That said, he would keep a very close eye on them and monitor their power increases and their loyalty. But one day, the Emperor would eradicate them too, and with them gone, there would never be any challenge to his power whatsoever. But that Plozers fans will be leaving this timeline off for now. I wanted to try a more open and shut what if because I usually do multi-parters, but I am willing to continue this story if it's shown a lot of support. If this video gets over 10,000 views, I will guarantee a part 2 that wraps up this entire timeline. So be sure to like and share the video, subscribe and ring the bell, and as always, go beyond plus ultra. See you guys next time.